Hey everybody, this is Pastor Peter Watts at the Rock Church, and I'm so glad that you decided to click the link and to watch our weekly devotional. And so what I decided to do was create these weekly devotionals that are an extension of the previous Sunday's message. And so it allows for those of you that follow us online or who see us face to face to engage with us during the week in a creative, different way. And so this past week, we looked at the power of one. And I spoke from the Gospel of Mark, chapter number 3, and verses 20 through verse number 27. And let me just kind of give you a summary of that particular pericope. And so in Mark chapter 3, beginning at verse number 20, Jesus is questioned by a couple of people. He's being followed by the multitude because of the different miracles that he has performed, and his family comes along and they tell him that he's out of his mind. And then the teachers of the law come and they begin to question Jesus about what he's doing, and they actually accuse him of actually casting out demons by the ruler of demons, Beelzebub himself. And so Jesus goes in and really points to them a question, and then he gives a small short parable at the end in verse 27. And so what I want to pay particular attention to in this text is the verse, I believe verse number 20 and 21, where Jesus says, "A house divided against itself cannot stand." And this past Sunday, we talked about the power of one, and how if we are going to move in our purpose, if we're going to move in our mission, that we cannot be on the same pages, we cannot have different agendas, but we have to move as one. And there were three things that I believe that keeps the house from being divided, that keeps people from being on different pages. And those three things were, number one, a leader must have vision. Number two, people must be willing to follow. And number three, the church must be willing to fight. And so I just want to look at those 3 points right now really quickly. Number one, a leader must have vision. And so the question I have for you is, what vision do you believe God has called you for? I want you this week to take some time, and I want you to reflect on that question. I want you to reflect, and I want you to write out a plan. You know, my family and I, every year we would do vision boards with our kids. And so we would sit down at the table, get magazines and glue and all these different things and poster board. And we would essentially put pictures and words and all of these things that would represent what we believe the vision that God has given us for our lives as a family and our lives individually. And so that's what I want you to do. I want you to think about this week, what vision has God given you for your life? And I want you to sit down, I want you to reflect on that and write that out. And then if you have crafts, if you are an arts and crafty person, create yourself a vision board this week. Number two, I said that in order to keep a house from being divided, people must be willing to follow. You know, God ultimately is our leader, and we follow him. We follow Christ. Christ will more times than not, will oftentimes lead us into difficult situations, into difficult and challenging places. And so the question that I want you to reflect on as well this week is, what areas of your life are you finding challenging, where it's hard for you to follow Jesus in? What areas of your life are you finding challenging, where it's hard for you to follow Jesus in? And then thirdly, the point was, if we're going to keep a house from being divided, the church must be willing to fight. And what we really said about that was that we have to be willing to fight for the unity of the church. We have to be willing to fight for the unity of our family and our country and our nation. We must be willing to fight. Paul says that we have to fight for the spirit of unity and the bond of peace in Ephesians. And so when you want to give up and you really feel like throwing in the towel, what would it look like for you if you decided to fight for your marriage? What would it look like for you if you decided to fight for your family, or to fight for your kids, or to fight for your finances, or to fight for your career, or even fight for the unity of our nation and of our church? And so those are the three concepts from this past week as we talked about the power of one and being in one purpose, one vision, moving in one direction. And so this week I want you to reflect on those 3 points, and I want you to reflect on those questions that I gave to you, and I'll see you next week. All right? Peace.